Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Paul Rykoff. I'm the CEO and founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I'm a combat infantry veteran myself and really appreciate you being here today. And want to start by thanking all of our VSO partners, our members who've come in from across the country, the members of the media that are here, and Representatives Gabbard and Mast. Burn pits may be our generation's Agent Orange. IAVA was founded about 15 years ago, and from the time we were founded, our members told us they were concerned. That issue has grown in its importance and its urgency, and over 80% of our members feel that they were exposed to burn pits during their deployments since 9/11. In the last couple of days, I've been in San Antonio, Atlanta, St. Louis, New York, now here in DC, and it's the issue I hear about from our members more than almost anything else. They feel like they haven't been heard, they feel like the public doesn't understand, and they feel like we need action. So that's what today is about. It's about relaunching a campaign to promote awareness about what burn pits are, what our members are experiencing nationwide, and calling for action and standing with allies who are committed to getting something done. This is a bipartisan issue, and it's especially inspiring to see a Republican and a Democrat, both post-9/11 vets, standing together to focus on it. This is more than about burn pits. This is about how government should work, about how politics can work, and about how veterans can lead the way. We can be a conscience, we can be a bridge, and we're leaders ready to answer the next call. When I was in Iraq, burn pits were everywhere. They were in Kuwait when we were in Kuwait, and we all sat around and breathed in all kinds of stuff that we had no idea what it would do to us long term, how it would affect us, how it might affect our families. So in many ways, this is not a new issue for our community, but it may be a new issue for the public. I was also a 9/11 first responder. I stood with many other veterans, firefighters, cops, and fought for the Zadroga bill, which is hard to pronounce, but very important. We had to fight to promote awareness for the health impacts of what happened at Ground Zero after 9/11. This is a similar fight. Millions of people may have been affected, and their families have been affected, and we need, we're sending up a flare today to call for action. So that's why we're here today. The hashtag is burn pits. Thank you for everybody in the media who's here, and thank you for the folks who are tuning in on our Facebook Live page. There are many folks who are serving overseas right now and are tuned into this issue and are standing by to take action. We're here to talk about the legislation as well, which is critical to help provide research, a basis for the facts, so we can really drive action, awareness, and support that may be needed. We shouldn't have to repeat the mistakes of Agent Orange. This is a chance for us to get ahead of the curve and take action that can change and save lives. I'm going to introduce in a couple minutes Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Then we're going to hear from Representative Brian Mast. Christine Thunderfill has come all the way from Orlando, Florida. She's an Army vet, and she has a personal story to share. Then we'll hear from Melissa Bryant, Army veteran, and our Chief Policy Officer. She's going to share some of the stories of our members as well. If you want to hear the stories, just use the hashtag. Even in the last couple of hours, vets are sounding off, telling us what they've experienced, what they're concerned about. So this is an opportunity for action. At a time when not a lot of stuff gets done in this town, this should be something that can get done smoothly, easily, and in a bipartisan way. So we hope we can get action on the bill, get the President's support, the SecDef support, and everybody's support in finally tackling burn pits, especially as we advance toward Memorial Day. Right? There are going to be a lot of folks who recognize Memorial Day. For our community, many of us will spend it at the cemetery rather than at the beach or at a barbecue. So we think this is a kind of action where Americans can actually step up and help and honor our fallen and honor those who are living in taking action on issues like burn pits. Burn pits are one of our big 6 priorities that we introduced earlier this spring that include suicide, supporting and recognizing women veterans, defending the GI Bill, reforming government to include the VA, burn pits, and medical cannabis access for wounded veterans. The representatives here today have stood with us on many issues, and they're leaders. They're young, they're dynamic, and they've got high energy and can tackle things. So we're honored to have them here today. And I'm going to start by introducing our friend Tulsi Gabbard. She's stood with us on many issues over the last few years. She's been a true leader for all veterans, all generations of veterans. And right now she's dealing with mass damage back in her home state of Hawaii. She's been a national voice for veterans, and especially for women veterans on our campaign to reform the VA, the She Who Born the Battle campaign. And she's a fighter. She's been there for us, and we're happy to see she's here for us again. We went to these offices over the last couple months and said, who's willing to step up? And Brian Mast and Tulsi Gabbard were the first ones to say, I'll step up, I'll lead the fight. So it's a formidable team, a bipartisan team, and we hope what the future of politics can look like and the team that can get this done. So I'm proud to start by introducing our friend, Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii.
Good morning and aloha. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with my fellow veterans to address this critical issue. I first want to say thanks to Paul and Melissa and IAVA and their team for bringing this issue to the forefront and leading the charge. Thank you to our fellow VSOs who are here to stand and support, as we do, veterans from all generations standing in solidarity to take care of our brothers and sisters in arms. Thanks to Christine for coming here to share your personal story that is representative of the personal stories of veterans all across this country who have served in this post-9/11 era. And last but not least, I'm honored to stand with my colleague, Brian Mast, fellow veteran, fearless leader here in Congress who is consistent in putting the mission of service to the American people first. There's not a single member of Congress that can tell you they don't get calls from Vietnam veterans still who are fighting to get their benefits because of their exposure to Agent Orange. This is a battle that they are continuing to fight today. It's been over 15 years since the first deployments began after 9/11, and yet the VA is not leaning into this issue of burn pits, which is the Agent Orange issue of the post-9/11 era veterans. I can't think of a single one of my fellow veterans who I deployed with, veterans who I've met along the way, who can tell you that they didn't have some exposure to burn pits. As Paul mentioned, they're everywhere. Whether you're in Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, burn pits were a part of everyday life. There's no research or mandatory tracking system in place on which veterans were exposed to these burn pits, what the effects on their health have been, how many there have been, and this all must happen in order for the follow-on action by the VA to take place. I want to share a quick story from a constituent of mine named Chris from Waianae in Hawaii, who's a 21-year Army retired veteran, reached out to my office just in the last couple of weeks to talk about his exposure to burn pits, wondering how he can be taken care of. Since his return home from multiple deployments to Iraq, he's received emergency surgery to remove his appendix, had a cancerous tumor removed, and 8 inches of his colon removed. While doctors have told him that his cancer was incredibly rare for his age and fitness level, the VA denied his claim to cover him while he was out of work for 4 months to recover. Chris's wife is also an Army veteran of 22 years, was also exposed to burn pits, and now experiences problems in her legs that doctors cannot explain. She was deployed to Camp Spiker in Iraq that produced so much trash it operated 7 burn pits simultaneously. This legislation is important, it's urgent, and it affects almost every single post-9/11 veteran today. I'm calling on our colleagues to join Congressman Mast and I to support H.R. 5671 so we can begin this burn pit accountability and take care of our brothers and sisters.
Next up is a guy who's really, I think, gotten tremendous support from our community in a short period of time. He's emerged on the national stage as a voice of courage, determination, and leadership. He embodies all the values of the military that we all stand for, and he inspires our membership. In the last couple weeks when we've informed them that Representative Mast has joined this fight and stepped up with us, they're inspired by his personal example, by his commitment, and by his focus. And that's also apparently gotten the attention of the White House. He's been talked about as a possible VA secretary nominee, and we need someone from our generation who understands our issues, who's been through the process. So it's a testament to his leadership, his focus, and his commitment to these issues. He hasn't forgotten where he's come from, and now he's leading our generation forward. So we're honored to have him here with us, and I'm proud to introduce Representative Brian Mast.
Tulsi did an outstanding job of thanking everybody in the room, so I'm not going to go through all that, but I do thank everybody for being here and taking the time. Nobody has to pay attention to war for that long to understand that some of the biggest, most paralyzing things that veterans come home with are not the things that are seen. They're not things that have scars on them, whether it's the mental issues that we come home from, the scars that are on our heart and are on our mind, or the scars that are inside of us, that are in our lungs and in our body from other things that we've experienced. Those can be the most paralyzing and crippling issues that we face. And most of us can be familiar with what a life is like for a lot of our service members. It's jumping out of planes, that's a hazard. It's being targeted by snipers, that's a hazard. It's walking across fields of landmines and improvised explosive devices, that's a hazard. It's our pilots that fly beyond the lines of our enemy. They might get shot down, they might get captured, that's a hazard. But overlapping all of this is the time on base, on CAF, on some other military installation well overseas where you're being exposed to these burn pits. Maybe it's your time out on a mission. We were out on mission night after night, inside compound after compound, and we would get things we called speedballs, which was extra water, extra supplies, extra MREs. And when we were done with that, inside of these little compounds, each and every night, we had our own burn pit right inside each and every one of those, which was filled with human feces, which was filled with every water bottle that we had just used, hundreds of them, which was filled with the plastic of every MRE that we had used over that time period in those periods of contact, and it's all burning, and we're all stuck there with it. That's just one small example. The airborne hazards that exist for our service members have 100 different faces. I was a bomb technician. For our bomb technicians out there that spend times in a pit where there was just a shot that went off with chemicals inside of it that you can't even touch without putting on rubber gloves, or those people that served during the Gulf War who did the breadth of their work under a massive cloud that was produced by hundreds of burning oil wells. These are the airborne hazards that are faced by our service members, not just today, but in years past, and has been referenced by several folks already. This is the Agent Orange of our generation, and we can't allow it to be manifesting itself in the same way that it has since the time of Vietnam, where we're limping along year after year, not doing what it takes, not fully recognizing the hazards out there for our veterans, not giving it the seriousness it deserves because of the way that it is affecting our warfighter that was willing to go overseas and give absolutely every single thing in their heart, in their mind, everything that they had, and to not recognize those hazards, it's not doing justice to that service member. And we're going to change that right now. Tulsi's in line for changing that right now. I'm in line for changing that right now. The other veterans that we work with here on the Hill are in line for changing that right now, and we're going to say that it stops here. I'm proud to be with all you people that are going to say it stops here as well. Thanks for letting me join you.
Thank you, sir. We've had an overflow of vets sharing their stories, especially in the last couple of months since we've elevated burn pits to a top area of focus. And I almost can't keep track of it. On Twitter, on Facebook, it's pouring in. I think another way to look at this is our members feel like their bodies are under attack, and they're calling for fire. They're calling for help. They've sent up the flare, and they're asking the American people to step up. They're asking Congress and the White House to step up, and we can't leave them behind. There's a lot of folks in this town who say they support the troops. This is a way to show it, by stepping up and hearing their stories and taking action. And a couple weeks ago, I was in New York at an event, and a vet flew all the way from Orlando, Florida, to talk to me in New York about her story and to share her story with me and some other veterans. And we were blown away. Her candor and her courage and her heart and her commitment, not just to herself, but to the folks in her family, the folks in her network, the folks she served with. It takes a lot of courage to step in front of a mic and tell your personal story. And that's what Christine did with me a couple weeks ago, and she's going to do today. It says a lot that we've got a rep from Hawaii and a rep from Florida. I mean, we're literally spanning the entire country, and Christine is a part of that charge, and we're honored to have her here today to share her story. So she's an Army veteran, again, from Orlando, Florida, and a real inspiration, Christine Thunderfield. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate you.
Hello, my name is Christina D. Thunderfield. I served in the United States Army, deployed for the invasion of Iraq, then to Balad from 2003 to 2004. If God does not give me a miracle, I will die. My death will be attributed to lung disease, pulmonary hypertension, Gulf War syndrome, beginning stages of dementia compounded by small vessel disease. Most of what I have and is attributable to the burn pits of Balad, Iraq, although my Army job was a chef. My job in Iraq was also to burn the human waste from the porta-johns with jet fuel. I also breathed in the toxic smoke because I was not given proper equipment. Learning that I am sick has been hard and emotionally difficult. But what is worse is knowing that if early diagnosis was made, it would have spared my life. My diagnosis was delayed because the Health Eligibility Center in Atlanta with the Oklahoma City VA took away my health care and then never gave me appeal rights for that. I was without health care for over 2.5 years. Even after jumping through hoops to fix the record, the Department of Veterans Affairs never updated it in their IT system until 2015. In the same breath, they said I was not a veteran and my service in Iraq meant nothing. They put me in a study for traumatic brain injury so they could get money, even though they said I was not allowed health care. These are your tax dollars at work. Please pass the burn pit legislation to ensure that no veteran has to suffer in silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for making the trip on short notice. You're a champion for all of us, and we're grateful. I hope that brings it home for folks in a personal way. This is not just about numbers. This is not just about policy. It's about people, and it's about people like Christine and many others. There are other veterans whose stories we want to share that couldn't be here today, and I'm proud to introduce next my colleague and Army veteran, Melissa Bryant. She's our Chief Policy Officer. She's constantly on the Hill working on behalf of our generation of veterans and all veterans, and she's been another fighter. She's a part of this team that's going to take this across the goal line, and she has important words to share. So please, Melissa Bryant, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Christina, for sharing your story. Jeffrey Wells, an IAVA member and veteran advocate, was slated to join us today as well and share his personal experience with burn pits and its effects on him. Unfortunately, as a result of his burn pit exposure, Jeffrey suffers from lung disease, which flared up last night and sent him to urgent care in the early hours of the morning. He has graciously allowed me to share his story in his absence, and we send our well wishes to Jeffrey. Here's his story. I'm a Navy veteran of both OIF and OEF, and while I have visible physical injuries, my recent diagnosis of respiratory illness is the most debilitating. One of my deployments, I spent 93 days, 24/7, within 300 meters of a burn pit. There is a direct link between the two. It is vital for Congress and our nation to understand that the dangers of conflict zones are not solely from bullets and IEDs, it is also the environment. My father served 3 tours in Vietnam and succumbed to illnesses resulting from Agent Orange exposure, and no treatment exists to this day. Jeffrey's story sounds very much like my own. I also come from a military legacy family. And seeing our VSO partners and MSO partners here, and I know that we have partnerships with those who were from the Vietnam era. From my own family, in 1968, somewhere between Placo and Way, my father's platoon passed through a strip of land, running alongside a stream that had been completely defoliated by Agent Orange. 50 years to this day, he still suffers from the pulmonary and respiratory issues that he first started suffering from in 1968. And 50 years to this day, he is still fighting with the VA and ensuring that all of that is recorded as a part of his service in Vietnam. When I served in Baghdad over 10 years ago at Camp Victory Base, the stench, the putrid stench of the constantly burning everything, mess of everything, in JP8, it hung in the air. And you eventually get used to it. It's the crud that we all just call, but you get used to it. But then you come home at 25, 26 years old, and you're wondering why all of a sudden you have shortness of breath when you used to be able to max a PT test. These are the challenges that our generation faces today. We cannot afford to wait like my father's generation, like Jeffrey's father's generation, like some of our brethren who are standing here to my left and to my right. We cannot afford to wait for Congress to not act, for our nation to not act now on burn pits. And so that's why, on behalf of IAVA's 425,000 members and the 21 million veterans in this country that our organizations here collectively represent. We would like to see the Burn Pits Accountability Act passed today, this year, in Congress, and signed and enacted into law by the President. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. You know, our goal in this part of the battle is the signing ceremony at the White House. That's what we did in the Clay Hunt bill. It's what we've done many other times before. Many of you have been with us, you know, along those rides. Sometimes they're tough. Usually they're tougher than they should be, but that's our goal. But that's just this phase. This is going to be a fight for generations. And this is one key battle in that long war that we'll need your help on. We'll need the public's help on. So for folks that are watching on Facebook or online, you know, go to IAVA.org, use the hashtag BurnPits. We've got information to share. We've got a video that's very powerful that we just released this morning that can help you communicate to people what burn pits are, and we've got ways for you to take legislative action and contact your members of Congress. You know, that is the call to action, and especially as we near Memorial Day, that's what we need. We're happy to take your questions, and I just want to thank everybody for being here, especially our VSO and MSO partners. I think we've got over 24 that have signed on to this, so this is a team effort. And when veterans get together, things get done, and that's what's going to happen here. Thank you again, everybody who's here, and we're happy to take any questions. Yes, please.
VSO partners who
Yeah.
joined us, why don't you come down?
The guys who just came in late, VSO guys and gals, come on in and join us up here if you like. Leo, go ahead.
Yeah, for the representatives, I'm wondering what the awareness level is among your colleagues. I mean, this isn't a new issue. We've talked about burn pits for quite some time, but do you get the sense that there's still a lot of lawmakers who don't understand just the depth of the problem or the you know what needs to be done here?
Just speaking from my own personal experience, the level of awareness amongst members of Congress is still abysmally low. This is why it's so important for us to push this issue in a real way with legislation, mobilizing not only veterans but people across the country to call on their member of Congress to take action, because too few members know about it and too few understand the urgency of the issue.
And to piggyback on that, you know, what was mentioned very well here is we have somebody whose position in the military was food preparation, but whose tasking was dealing with burn pits on a day-to-day basis and everything nasty that encompasses that. Even when somebody that hasn't been in the military is aware that burn pits existed out there, that doesn't mean that they're aware. They often quite often look at these things through the narrow channel of, you know, were you assigned to a job that's what you did? And if you weren't, well, how could that possibly affect you? They don't understand the way that the military works, that there's no job beneath anybody, and anybody might be tasked at any given time to be the person mopping up the floor or cleaning up the waste. And that's one of the things that unfortunately isn't recognized by everybody out there.
I was going to ask, like, again, similar to his question too, what kind of hurdles are you facing and what have your conversations been with the Department of Veteran Affairs? And what are the next steps in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think on all veterans issues right now, we've got to, you know, crack through the noise in this town. And that's where, you know, folks in the media here can help, our members online and around the country can help. There's a lot of stuff that, you know, in this town seems to be on fire. So we've got to make sure they understand that this was about a real fire and about things that are really impacting people's health. So, you know, you should ask the VA and DOD today. You should ask the White House today. We hope they will all stand with us immediately. This should be a no-brainer. And this could be, you know, frankly, an important and easy political win for folks who are going home to their constituents this summer and running for re-election. You're going to get asked about burn pits. They're going to ask you what you're doing. So we need action from everybody, and you know, including Acting VA Secretary Wilkie would love his support on this. Secretary Mattis, the President, everybody should be on board and help us move this forward quickly, because there will be other phases too. That will have to happen, but this is the important phase that we should be able to get through quickly.
Just want to add quickly, we are quickly gaining co-sponsors to the legislation, in large part because of the actions of IAVA and the VSO of raising the awareness of members of Congress. Congresswoman Lujan Grisham is here as a co-sponsor of the legislation. There are others who wish that they could be here, but we're seeing already the momentum beginning to grow.
We've all heard of things like cancer clusters in different communities. This is a cluster just like that exists in every community, but it's comprised of its veterans. And I think that makes it a really easy way to recognize it for people that may not be as exposed to what this really is.
Any other questions?
Paul, real quick, because you mentioned earlier the need for more awareness for the post 9/11 generation, especially with the leadership void at VA right now. What kind of role can the next secretary play in highlighting issues like this, especially if it is somebody who's from the younger generation? I mean, I know there's been a lot of sympathy and a lot of talk about this, but I don't know if there's that level of understanding from the folks who've been through it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's someone from our generation, they can say this happened to me, rather than saying this happened to them. You know, I think when it's in the right direction and all things are clicking, the VA secretary is not just head of the VA; they're the veterans advocate. They're the leading voice for awareness and action and community involvement. So again, like imagine the opportunity that exists on Memorial Day when folks are talking about what that day is all about and having a VA secretary out there talking about burn pits. That's what we need. So the opportunity is I think, clear. The bipartisan opportunity is also significant. Leo, you've covered it better than anybody. But HVAC and SVAC have been very productive, and there's an opportunity to keep that momentum and use it as a way to unite Congress that can't seem to really unite on anything else. But you know, this is going to be, we also need not just a one-off. Leo, you've seen many one-offs. We need a long-term strategy for burn pits that we didn't have with Agent Orange and we don't have right now in burn pits.